Good morning, atheists, agnostics, skeptics, free thinkers, whatever you like to call yourself, you are welcome here. At Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural talked about from the podium. Today's talk is on the book Everybody is Wrong About God by James Lindsay. So, what is God? James Lindsay.
Can we close that door so I can hear a little bit?
Sure.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, I got it.
Thank you.
Oh.
I want to hear you.
There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, James Lindsay presents an original idea. He says that everyone, including the non-religious who discuss God, have been doing it all wrong. We're doing it wrong because we're discussing God in a theistic context. He says that the word atheism is also rooted in a theistic context. And so he wants to do away with that as well. He feels that we are now in a post-atheist world. The new atheists, those atheists that after 9/11 were willing to take the position that not only is religious belief false, but actually dangerous, have won the cultural war. He cites the success of books like The God Delusion and The End of Faith to support this claim. Well, I think that his claim that we are post-atheist is absurd. Atheists, by their very existence, make the majority of people feel so challenged that it is a social risk to call yourself an atheist. Unless, like the author James Lindsay, you have degrees in physics and mathematics and are surrounded by scientists and are friends with people like Sam Harris and Peter Boghossian. In that circumstance, I'm sure that being an atheist carries no social risk. But the rest of the America is far from being post-atheist. Saying that atheists have won the cultural war is a bit like a mantra. You can keep repeating it, but that doesn't make it so. So he wants non-believers to stop talking about God as if it were a being, even if, as an atheist, you are doing it to disprove the existence of God. You are wrong about God. You are wrong that God does not exist. God does exist. God is part of a myth that humans use to manage their unmet psychological needs, psychosocial needs. And if you begin to discuss what God is or is not, the arguments against the existence of some sort of being, however metaphorically you describe it, you have wandered off the road. You are discussing the attributes of a mythological being that has no actual definition in reality. In some versions of a belief, some attributes will be stressed above others, but it doesn't make sense to discuss how it would be in reality. Myths are created to provide answers to questions that are sufficiently complex so that we cannot yet, maybe never, answer them with naturalistic answers. So yes, God does exist. But God is an idea captured in a myth to provide necessary psychosocial benefits. And I'll talk about those benefits in a moment. I'll digress for a moment and tell you that not only does he want to stop discussing God, he wants us to stop discussing atheism. He is very concerned about atheism becoming a religion. He rightly notes that atheism is now being mixed with extra things, such as feminism, secularism, scientific naturalism, and critical thinking. He goes on to worry it will become an unquestionable ideology. So he thinks if it's a religion, it will become an unquestionable ideology. And I would say that his concern is miscalculated. And it makes me wonder, I'm being a little facetious here, if he understands what critical thinking actually means. It means being able to question things. Atheism is a disbelief in God, but when atheism is mixed with secularism, scientific naturalism, and critical thinking, as we like to do it here at the CL Atheist Church, it becomes a resulting belief system where everything must be questioned. We need to ensure that questioning is valued, taught, encouraged, and discussed. Just as a certain branch of Christianity would emphasize hard work and prudence, while another might emphasize charitable works, a certain form of atheism emphasizes secularism, scientific naturalism, and critical thinking. That's what our church is founded on, those things. So he is concerned that we should not live in reaction to theism. But for now, theism is so prevalent a worldview that I think it is a responsible thing to react against it and give people the tools to react against it. This is especially true if he is right that God is an idea that people use when they don't have a natural answer. CL Atheist Church aims to help people arrive at natural answers. And sometimes we talk about God, if one could say that this book is about God, for example, but we also talk about post-theist things, such as secular ideas about emotions, morality, and death. He says that to be an atheist implies that you are standing against the belief system which includes God. Well, he's right about that. But he argues that no one really believes in God actually. The psychology of religion tells us that God is a placeholder for other psychological needs. And you can discover what these needs that are being met by God are by listening to people talk about their faith. He says, in practice, when you discuss what God means to people, instead of answering, they will raise questions. The questions that God is supposed to answer. How can you look at an ocean and not believe in God? What about love? What about the meaning of life and the purpose for living? So we need to focus on how people can answer those questions. That is where we should focus. And he advises you not to engage, repeat, do not engage Christian apologists, as this perpetuates the illusion of a God as a being which can be either accepted or rejected. God is not a being. God is a myth that helps humans deal with their psychosocial needs. Because everybody is wrong about God, the way everyone has been discussing God is wrong. He denies that the word God has meaning. He points out that the meaning of God is always shifting, varying by individual. Even if it were possible to define God, it would still not account for the variety of religions that all claim to believe in God and based on his will, and yet do it differently. So he wants to do away with the entire debate with theists and the attendant conversation about atheism. God has nothing much to do with belief in a supernatural being, except in the mythological sense, and everything to do with humans' attempt to answer the unanswerable. That is where we should focus our attention. On his blog, God Doesn't, he is a good example of God really being a stand-in for complex issues that a person has not identified or articulated. His friend was having some trouble with his marriage. The marriage was saved when the two people drew upon their faith. The man drew a triangle for his wife and put their names in each of the corners on the bottom and God in the pinnacle at the top. He wrote, "The closer we get to God, the closer we get to each other." And then James Lindsay asks, is this asinine? Well, not if we substitute the ideas that the psychology of religion tells us are core to religious belief for the word God. So quoting from the blog here, for example, if you made these statements, okay? The better our senses of meaning of life are aligned, the closer we get to each other. That's not asinine. The more closely our moral attitudes match, the closer we get to each other. That is not asinine. The more similarly we see ourselves and our places in the world, the closer we get to each other. That is not asinine. The more we rely upon overlapping understandings of how the world works, the closer we get to each other. That is not asinine. Just from that cute, silly drawing, we get some real sense of what people mean when they say the word God. They mean a sense of meaning in life. They mean morals. They mean their personal context in the world and in their communities. They mean how they make sense of the world and life. Can we understand now why it doesn't make sense to debate the existence of God? But it does make sense to acknowledge the existence of a mythology as an attempt to make meaning of life's complex questions. Now, we are ready to move forward to looking for meaning in a natural context. When we start discussing the idea of God as if it was a being whose existence can be considered by religious philosophy, it is worse than a useless discussion. It gives credence to the religious person's idea that there is something to debate and defend. People don't believe in God for rational reasons, therefore rational arguments will never change their belief. Anyway, the savvy religious person, one who is not a fundamentalist, would claim that they also do not believe in the God that we are attempting to argue against, however metaphorically we may construct him. This is the God that they would allow themselves off the hook of defending by saying, well, I don't believe in that God either. So what God do they believe in? We need to consider why people really believe in God and focus on discussing those psychological reasons to move to a post-theistic worldview, and therefore a worldview in which atheism is also not relevant. We have a psychological need to believe that things have answers and make sense. Why did something happen? Because God wanted it that way. Is there a purpose to our lives? Yes, God has a purpose for every person. And God will never allow you to be tested beyond your limits. God will never give you more than you can handle. God will punish your enemies and allow you to be among the chosen. These psychological needs are for attribution, control, and sociality. We have a need to explain why and how events occur. And usually we prefer naturalistic explanations for things. But when we lack sufficient understanding, we fill in the gaps with God. Things happen a particular way because God made it so or wanted it so. We all have a need for control. Psychologists believe it is psychologically overwhelming to understand the smallness of our lives in terms of the vastness of our world, our universe, and time. We basically realize we have very little control. But it is helpful to believe that something has control, or that we can exert some control by following rules, or by prayer, or by faith. Religion helps people feel a part of a social fabric. A belief in shared values enables people to trust one another. People in a church feel part of a group. People in a denomination feel part of a larger group, part of a faith, a larger group still, all the way up till the believer is transcendentally part of all creation. This can facilitate in-group and out-group behavior. It can enable people to feel part of something greater than themselves. It provides rituals for joining and reconciling to the group through confession, penance, and reconciliation. All of these religious needs, by the way, are also arguments for atheist church. Now, he completely disapproves of atheist church, but church gives us attribution, the ability to understand why things occur. It offers naturalistic explanations for discussing the unknown. It allows us a feeling of control, that we can use reason and logic to exert control over our circumstances. And where we cannot, at least we can discuss our feelings. We can explicitly discuss that in lieu of eternity. Atheists only get a small slice of life. Then we can ponder what are the implications of living only a small slice of eternity. We can exercise our angst about death by naming our slice of life and saying it is no less important because it is finite. Finally, in an obvious way, church helps build sociality by giving us a like-minded community. While it's not a community that will always agree, it is a community that is agreed to the importance of disagreement. It is a community that is committed to attempt intimacy through discussing important things and being as intellectually honest with each other as we are capable of being. Last week, we talked about paradigm shifts and how they are created when a particular framework for thinking about a thing is radically overthrown after centuries of being in place. This dialogue about theism and atheism is exactly that, a conversation we've been having for hundreds of years. But what if we've been completely wrong about God? And instead of discussing the type of being that it is, we simply agree it is a myth created to meet psychosocial needs. And what if we learned to become comfortable identifying our psychosocial needs and became comfortable with not having all the answers, and instead learned to talk about our need for meaning and control and sociality directly? Of course, I think he's completely wrong in trying to do away with atheism, because an atheist church explicitly tries to replace the way those needs were met in the past with new ways to meet those needs. I will close the way I always do. Atheists believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. Thank you.